Chapter 4 of Fact Stranger Than Fiction by John Patterson Green. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Mayflower Common and Sunday Schools and Troy Hill. "Well," said my mother one morning, after I'd been at home long enough to regain my composure, "if you will not work, you must go to school. I'm not a-going to allow you to run the streets." She could not have pleased me more than she did by that declaration, for I had already become aware of the fact that all the boys with whom I had made acquaintance were schoolboys, and I longed to be one of their number. So early on one September morn, with face wreathed in smiles and hopes beating high, I sallied forth with the gang, and in the course of 15 minutes I stood in the august presence of Miss Sarah A. Nelson, teacher in the intermediate department for boys of the Mayflower School, situated in Orange Street, nearly opposite the south end of Hudson Street, near East 30th Street. The principal of Mayflower School at that time was Mr. Edwin R. Perkins, a young gentleman recently graduated from Dartmouth College, to the best of my memory, for whom the fates were even then spinning the thread of a long and useful life which he so richly merited. As a teacher he was learned, enthusiastic, ambitious, and he was one of those whose very presence inspired and energized for the accomplishment of worthy deeds, and his long and glorious achievements along financial, commercial, and social lines attest all that I have said in the foregoing. A good spanking which he administered to me when I was in the second year of attendance at that now famous school did somewhat, I believe, to open my eyes to the verities of this life, and to start me in the right way to meet them. Amongst the others of the teachers there at that time may be mentioned the widow of the late E. R. Perkins, who was his efficient assistant, also Miss Laura C. Spellman, subsequently Mrs. John D. Rockefeller, Miss Leonard, afterward Mrs. Norton, Mrs. Eliza Brinsmaid, a sister of the late Colonel Allen T. Brinsmaid, Miss White, Miss Johnson, and last but not least Miss Sarah A. Nelson, subsequently Mrs. Rood, of Kalispell, Minnesota. I had no books for the intermediate grade, or any other grade for that matter. Mother told me to tell Miss Nelson that she had no money to buy me books with, which I did, and Miss Nelson, from some source unknown to me, procured a set of used books and gave them to me. That grade was then the next grade below the grammar grade, over which the principal presided, and I was ambitious as ever to get passed into the grammar grade. As a result, I was a hard student and an apt pupil. Miss Nelson said to Mother, "John is one of my smartest pupils, and the worst." In very truth, I was the incarnation of mischief, but as I view the condition from this distance, it was my all-consuming desire to be spectacular which lay at the bottom of my misbehaviour, for in playing 20, which carried us over hill and dale, and frequently far away from the school building, distributing bits of paper in our course, and in running, jumping, and other athletic sports, it was ever my desire to be foremost. And whether I accomplished it or not, I laid aside every weight, and strove right manfully for success. I was always anxious to perform some feat which no other boy would dare to do, so as to be talked about. In fact, it was true, as was said of me by a distinguished gentleman later on in life, when he characterized me as a born actor, and I could only yield to the natural impulse to act show-off, as my mother denominated it. Along this line, let this one incident be recorded. I'd been misbehaving myself in some silly way, making grimaces, passing notes, whispering, or doing some other act contrary to the rules of the school, and it was as the law of the Medes and the Persians that at the recess I would come in contact with the black ebony, or ligum vitae, instrument of torture which our teacher was accustomed to wield in the torture chamber. So I watched my chance to defer the punishment as long as possible. The opportunity came when Miss Nelson stepped out of the room for some purpose. Then, regardless of life or limb, and in defiance of all rules and reason, I climbed out of a second-story window, grasped the convenient lightning rod, and slid down to the ground. The sequel can be imagined when next I made my appearance in that school, for I received not only the deferred punishment, but with compound interest. However, in one respect I was successful. For a short period I was the cynosure of all eyes, the hero of the hour. With all that the foregoing implies, it is a peculiar fact that when we were taking our leave for the long summer vacation, I was apparently the only one of all who regretted it. It was sad to take my leave from the first truly congenial company of boys that I had ever known, and many times during the space before the September term I sighed and longed for the return of school days. My speech at that time was a sort of patois of the English language, a southern dialect. For Carrie I said tote, nor could I pronounce our English American. R I pronounced pretty much after the manner of Happy Hooligan. For dirt I said doit, and for squirt I said squoit. The boys laughed at me inordinately and constantly joked me. However, I proved to be an apt pupil, and ere long I could roll the R almost equal to a continental. Time flew, and when the next vacation came around, I got my passport to the grammar grade, where under the watchful eye of Mr. Perkins the one spanking referred to above was quite sufficient to hold me until I was transferred to the Hudson Street School, which was in our immediate neighbourhood. During my tutelage at the Mayflower School, I was sent on one occasion to report to Mr. Andrew Fries, the grand and wonderfully efficient superintendent of the Cleveland schools, for the reason that I had played truant, in order that I might attend the circus which visited Cleveland. Mr. Fries had his headquarters in the old Central High School building, at that time located on the lot of land where now stands the Citizens Savings and Trust Company, in Euclid Avenue, near East Ninth Street, formerly Erie Street. Mr. Fries was the incarnation of the educational idea. He loved his schools and was fond of the society of boys, and running over with good nature. I approached this august functionary with fear and trembling. "Well, sir," he exclaimed, "what brings you here?" I answered in a whining manner that I had been sent to him to report an infraction of the rules of the Mayflower School in absenting myself for a day to attend the circus. "Well," he replied, in a spirited manner, "did you go to the circus?" I answered in the affirmative. "All right, then," he said. "If you went in and didn't hang around on the outside, I'll excuse you. You may go back to school, but don't do it again." Here was a man full of the milk of human kindness. He had been a boy himself, and although well advanced in years, he had not forgotten the thrill of feeding knickknacks to the elephant, watching the antics of the monkeys, listening to the jokes of the clown, and witnessing Mademoiselle gracefully jump through the balloons while riding the fiery and untamed steed. Dear good Mr. Fries, was there ever another like him? Long will he live in the memory and the hearts of the boys and girls of the schools of Cleveland, who were by his learning, energy, and wisdom encouraged and stimulated to soar to heights which might not have been attained by them in his absence. During the first winter of my attendance at Mayflower School, the writer was perilously near the grave for having no overcoat and insufficient warm underwear to protect him from the cold of this northern climate. Pneumonia got him in its grasp, and he was saved by the skillful treatment of a homeopathic physician and the good nursing of his dear mother from a premature death. So the years glided by until the spring of 1859 was at hand, when, the times being hard and mother being now greatly in need of my assistance, I left the Hudson Street Grammar School and went in search of some remunerative employment. And as I was now increased in weight to about 100 pounds, and evinced a redundancy of energy along other lines, it seemed but reasonable that I should in the sweat of my face earn my daily bread. As an evidence of my masterful energy at that time, the following true anecdote is related. A consuming desire to own a pair of skates seized upon me. All the other boys were upon the ice having the time of their life, while I would only stand and look on. Every evening witnessed a veritable carnival, and joy reigned supreme. Of course it was useless to ask mother for money to buy skates with, for I had not even boots on my feet, which in those days nearly every boy wore. I was glad to be possessed of warm shoes under the circumstances. So taking our buck or wood saw and a light buck, I sallied forth in quest of firewood to saw and split. and after much walking I finally found a cord of hickory wood, made a bargain with its owner, and sawed, split, and piled it up before I returned to my home. 75 cents to the good, as the boys say. On the following days I found and sawed, split, and piled 2 additional piles, one of hickory and the other of oak. One of these 2 cords I sawed twice into 3 pieces. For this work I received the sum of $1.75, making in all a total of $2.50. With this money I bought my skates and mingled with the gay crowds on the pond. After a while, having neither time nor inclination to use them longer, I sold them for $1, which I was glad to receive for them. In the summer of 1859 I was taught the process or trade of caning chairs. I was 14 years of age, and anxious to be earning something. The labor incidental to the repairing of the chairs was a mere bagatelle in comparison with that of finding the chairs, returning them, and walking to the chair factory and return, then located in the town of Newburgh, and said to be 8 miles from Cleveland, where I purchased a bundle of cane for the price of 50 cents. The only other means of reaching Newburgh was by the railroad or by stagecoach, the starting point of which was in the yard of the old wooden commercial hotel, located on a lot on the southwest corner of Long Avenue and West 3rd Street. In the fare one way by this conveyance was 20 cents. About 150 feet west of this old hotel, in the location of the present Central Police Station, was the dwelling and lot of a colored man named Davis. He was of mixed blood, and so large that he could neither mount nor dismount from his buggy without assistance. Mr. Davis was for years the city sprinkler, and moistened our dusty streets under contract with the city. About the year 1858, through the courtesy of the late Miss Mary Alston, sister of the Reverend William Alston, of whom I gave an account in the first chapter, and her married sister, Mrs. William Sampson, who were departing for Raleigh, North Carolina, on an extended visit, we were invited to take charge of their comfortable residence in Cedar Avenue gratis until their return. This residence was cozy and homelike, and we spent a year there very pleasantly. I am mentioning this Cedar Avenue home especially because it first brought me in touch with one of the leading families of the whole world, and because this family contained as a member of it the richest man in the world, not connected with royalty in any respect, and who in his own lifetime and through the fertility of his own brain has accumulated his fortune, now living, or who has ever lived in so far as history, ancient or modern, has disclosed to us. And I may add that in the size and number of his gifts while living he has no peer. Of course, reference is made to the great and good John D. Rockefeller, whom I rejoice to call not only an acquaintance of mine, but also a friend. Mr. Rockefeller was then a mere youth in 1858, and I frequently saw him leave his home in Cedar Avenue for his place of employment in the morning, and also return in the evening. The residence of the Rockefeller family at that time was on the north side of Cedar Avenue, and the last of 3 similar brick houses from Cleve, now East 25th Street, going west. The building is still standing and maintains its appearance very well. Mr. Frank Rockefeller, late deceased, was at that time a member of Old Mayflower School, and generally led the boys in their vigorous sports, but I have no remembrance of having ever seen his august brother otherwise than engaged in going to and returning from his daily duties. Amongst other boys who were of our party in athletic sports at that time may be mentioned the late W. H. King, who at one time served a term as commissioner of this county, also James and Andrew Dahl, who subsequently figured conspicuously as builders of large structures in Cleveland, and Andrew Dahl with Colonel McAllister built and owned the Mohawk Building, now known as the American Trust Building, near the old courthouse and the public square. Mr. George B. Christian, for a long time Secretary and Treasurer of the Cleveland Provision Company, was also a modest, lovable member of our gang, and the late Frank Chandler, for many years a wholesale dealer in provisions in the downtown section. William Whitworth and Hugh and Henry Lowry were also very much in evidence as boys. About this time this writer was seized with a desire to become a member of the Shakers, so called, who were followers of Mother Ann Lee, whose headquarters were in the state of New York. These religiously believed in celibacy. They were neither married nor given in marriage, and in their communal settlements occupied separate apartments in the same buildings and sat at their meals at separate tables. At the time referred to they owned a large tract of land in the eastern suburbs of Cleveland and were divided into three several communities. The East House was in that portion of the tract which contains the present Shaker Lake or Shaker Heights, where their grist mill was located, which ground the grain produced by the Shakers. The center was presided over by Elder James, who was the ranking elder of the whole sect in that vicinity, and the other group was still further removed. The religious exercises consisted in silent prayer and meditation, for the most part, and communal dancing. The tables and other furniture being drawn back, the dance would begin, the men on one side of the hall, and the women on the other side facing each other, and at times it was quite animated and exhilarating. There was no violin or other musical instrument to furnish music for the participants, singing alone, giving zest to their movements, which at times rivaled anything in that line that I had ever seen. So interested and enthused was the writer that he, during his brief sojourn there, became quite expert in their terpsichorean movements, and to this day remembers two of their refrains, which he will here record for the benefit of such as may be interested. The first was as follows: Dancing is a sweet employ, fills the soul with heavenly joy, makes the love of union flow, round and round we go. La la lo la lo, lo la lo la lo la lo, lo la lo lo la lo la lo la lo la lo. The second, as far as I can remember it, after the lapse of 62 years, was as follows: We have loved, for we have love to give you. Heavenly love, 'tis from your blessed mother. And now we wave it unto you, as free as we received it, and we are not going to stop until we make you feel it. At the end of the last line the words "feel it" were pronounced with much zest, and with an accompanying clap of the hands, as if suiting the action to the word. While the dancers were whirling and marching around, the palms of the hands, extended forward, were waved upwards as if to send greeting, each side to the other. Finally, becoming wearied or satisfied, the dancing would cease, and the participants would retire, each sex to its respective quarters. Before being received into full fellowship, an oral examination of the candidates was made by the presiding elder and such other of the committee as were appointed for that function, during which the applicant was required to make a full and free confession of his previous sins. This writer, having complied with all the requirements along this line, was received in full fellowship, and thenceforward was treated in all respects as an equal, not even the fact that he was a colored boy causing any differentiation between him and the others. After worshiping with them and working in the big garden, weeding long rows of onions and riding a plow horse, the time came when his mother discovered his whereabouts, and her demand of his person was promptly acceded to, a fact which I deeply regretted, for I was being furnished sumptuous repasts, and I enjoyed the dancing very much. The Shakers found a ready sale for all the products of their farms and the manufactures of their workshops in our market, for they were strictly honest in all their representations. My next escapade was to start on a tour of the world with only a few dimes in my purse. I had read of Captain John Smith of Pocahontas fame, who, it was said, traveled afoot over Europe when a boy of 15 years of age, and I longed to rival his achievement, and with a companion of my own age and size we started on our serious undertaking. After walking to Berea, we boarded a freight car, crawled into a threshing machine, and went to sleep. When we awoke next morning, we found ourselves in the outskirts of Toledo, but on attempting to penetrate into the young city, we were turned back and told to beat it, which we did without protest or delay, working our way homeward until we finally reached our destination. On another occasion, I walked in 10 hours from Cleveland to Paynesville, there boarded a freight train, and ere long found myself in Buffalo. Taking another car, I rode to Niagara Falls, and after walking across the great suspension bridge, I barely placed my feet on Canadian soil when I was turned back. Lockport, New York, was as far as I reached, where, half famished and footsore, I, like another prodigal tramp, repented rode on the bumper between two cars back to Buffalo, stowed away between some sacks of coffee on the deck of the great steamer City of Buffalo, and next morning found myself back again in Cleveland. This was the last attempt to rival Captain John Smith, and thenceforward I settled down to honest labor. Knowing that the tenure of the Alston-Sampson residence by us was limited to the period of their absence, and that it was necessary for her to provide a suitable home for herself and family by the time of their return, our mother did not allow the opportunity to slip by unimproved. And being a member of the First Baptist Church, which contained on the list of its membership the names of persons who were at once both wealthy and generous, she made known to some of them her straitened condition. Amongst those approached was the late James Madison Hoyt, Esquire, father of the late Reverend Wayland Hoyt, for many years pastor of one of the leading Baptist churches of the city of New York, whose learning and eloquence was noted throughout the United States. Colgate Hoyt, Esquire, well-known financier of the same place, and former president of the Ohio Society of New York. James H. Hoyt, late deceased, who was the head of one of the leading law firms of Cleveland and one-time prominent candidate for governor of Ohio. Mr. Elton Hoyt, successful real estate dealer, and the late Mrs. Lydia Holt, farmer, popular and influential society leader, long since deceased. As to the ancestry of Mr. Hoyt, I have no knowledge, but judging him by his personal bearing, together with the high and gentle port of his family and his unselfish, generous life, I can truthfully say that he was one of nature's noblemen, a typical Christian gentleman. Shortly prior to the time when mother interviewed him, Mr. Hoyt had opened the street extending from Central Avenue to Woodland Avenue, and named it Laurel Street, and when she sought to contract for a lot on that street, the present name of that street is East 29th Street, he persuaded her to take one on Garden Street, now called Central Avenue, alleging as a reason that in the not distant future it would be much more valuable than the one on Laurel Street. Garden Street at that time was lined on both sides with neat, cozy homes, shaded by attractive trees. Yielding to Mr. Hoyt's good judgment and friendly consideration, the contract was signed, and thereby the outlook for our future home was brightened. The next problem of most difficult solution was the placing of a residence on the lot, but having bought an antiquated house in the neighborhood, mother had it moved thereon, repaired so as to render it tenable, and immediately moved into it. So finally she was once more at home with her orphan children. 2 years flew by, yet not 1 cent had been paid on principal or interest, and when the agent demanded either or both, mother answered, "I can't pay you anything. Where do you expect me to get money from?" Thereupon one fine day came the mild, genial James H. Hoyt, when the following colloquy ensued. "Mr. Hoyt, now, Mrs. Green, don't be discouraged. Only have faith and industriously work, and you can accomplish much." Mother: "But, Mr. Hoyt, the interest accrues faster than I could pay it, even if I should try to buy the lot." Mr. Hoyt: "Never mind the interest, Mrs. Green. I will cancel all the interest due down to date, if you will only try. You have a son who will be able in a year or two to earn something and assist you. Now do try and see what you can accomplish, Mrs. Green." Next morning, mother, addressing this writer, said, in her earnest tone of voice, substantially as follows: "John, you seem to be tired of going to school, so you must go to work. Now go out and see if you can't find something to do." Never did the mother or father eagle stir up the nest more effectually. The fiat had gone forth, and I well understood what that meant. Day after day I trod the streets of this city in quest of employment, but in vain. One would say, "I want a boy, but he must be a white boy." Another would say, "No, I haven't enough work for myself." A far-reaching, most disastrous panic had seized the vitals of our industries and finances, and even a first-class mechanic was in luck to have a job at $1 for a day of 12 hours. A third said, "I need a boy, but you are too small. You would not answer my purpose," and so we reached the middle of July without accomplishing anything. Then mother, again Spartan-like as ever, said, "John, go to the post-office door every evening when gentlemen call for their mail, we had no carriers in those days, and ask every one when he goes in or comes out for work. I obeyed her implicitly, and on the second day a gentleman of the cloth looked down upon me benignantly, heard my plea for employment, and set me to work hoeing rows of vegetables and weeding the grass from others. My employer was the Reverend Dr. Bittinger, pastor of the Third Presbyterian Church, the big church which was located on the southeast corner of Euclid Avenue and Brownwell Street, now East 14th Street, where the great Hannah Building now stands. His residence was hard by, east of the church. Dr. Bittinger paid me well for my half-day's work, and I carried the money to my mother, rejoicing. I might add in passing that during the previous winter I had sold the Cleveland Leader on the streets mornings, getting up before day and walking a mile to the office to get them. Also in the afternoons I sold the Evening Herald through all the lower part of the city, even down in Merwin Street, frequently going into the store where Mr. Rockefeller in his youth was employed. However, all things come to him who only stands and waits, and finally a job came to me, or I went to it. My employer was Mr. William A. Neff, who resided in Doane Street, now East 105th Street, between Euclid and Cedar Avenues on the east side of the street. For the consideration of $4 per month, I sawed and split all the firewood, drove the cow up on Cedar Heights to pasture and return, cared for one horse, performed all errands to and from a stone quarry upon the heights and to the city Cleveland and return, kept a very large garden free from weeds, hoed an acre of corn and potatoes, and gathered up in the streets all the fertilizer I could find to enrich the soil of the garden. Occasionally I stood on the Central Market offering some of the products of the garden for sale. Of the $40 which I received for 10 months' labor, here we paid $27 and $50 to $100 of it to Mr. Hoyt towards the purchase price of that little home. When winter came, a brother of my employer was given the bed upon which I had been sleeping, and I was relegated to the floor of the same room, and given a bundle of straw upon which to sleep. The bag containing the straw being too short for me, my feet were partly exposed to the cold, with the result that I was seized with a recurrence of the pneumonia which had afflicted me 2 years before, and I came within sight of the valley of the shadow at my home. However, notwithstanding the foregoing hardships and discouragements, Ike, as the brother was named, and I, being temperamentally much alike, indulged in a few pastimes which were mutually congenial to us, one of which is to this day fresh in my memory, and tends to disclose the redundancy of spirits which animate the average youth, and flow on with an abandon which not even Niagara Falls can surpass. It is, as the crow flies, just 5 miles from Doane, East 105th Street, where we resided, to the Wilshire Building, where the old Melodeon Hall used to stand. Ike and I both were burning with a desire to attend a performance of one of the famous minstrel companies which was advertised to appear in that hall on a cold winter's night. There were no streetcars in those days, nor any means of transportation for the average man or boy, except shanks mares, as was the slang for walking then. So having finished our evening meal, we sallied forth. At the expiration of about 1 hour and a half, we found ourselves cozily seated in the gallery of the hall. The program was long and interesting. The singing, dancing, and jokes richly repaid us for all our trouble and expense, and when at midnight we reached our home, we were thoroughly satisfied. One of the jokes caused us to laugh inordinately, and although it is to my knowledge 59 years old, I will venture to record it. Mr. Johnson: Bones, can you tell me what a focus is? Bones: Ha, ha, ha. Can I tell you what a focus is? Why, of course I can. Anybody knows dat. Mr. Johnson: Well, since you are so sure, what is a focus? Bones: A focus is a place where dey raises pigs. The whole troop, shaking with laughter and scorn: Where they raise pigs. Ha, ha, ha. Bones: Well, den, since you all know so much about it, what is a focus? Mr. Johnson: Well, sir, a focus is a place where the rays meet. Bones: Well, ain't pigs meat? With startling effect upon all present. When the spring flowers began to bloom in 1861, and the call of the birds was enchanting, I sallied forth again, and in a few days found myself in the employ of the late Robert Hannah, Esquire, brother of the late Dr. Hannah, who was the father of that noble group of sons of whom the late Marcus A. Hannah, great promoter, merchant, manufacturer, banker, senator, and president maker, and L.C. Hanna, Esquire, late deceased, big-hearted, munificent, and successful captain of industry, were the most conspicuous. I must add here that it will perhaps never be known to what a great extent Senator M.A. Hanna, and through him our martyred President McKinley, and the general public were indebted to the business sagacity, energy, and strenuous application of the late L.C. Hanna in caring for the growth and success of the great M.A. Hanna Company during Senator Hanna's political activities and protracted absence from Ohio, thereby contributing towards the grand success of the McKinley administration, which blessed us all. I remained with Mr. Robert Hanna until the summer of 1862, when, getting above my business, I left his employ and took service with Mr. A. H. Harvey, the stepfather of the wife of the late Fayette Brown, Esquire, and mother of Harvey Brown, Esquire, who conducted a large sawmill on a small island in the Allegheny River between Pittsburgh and Allegheny City, now a part of the city of Pittsburgh. Mr. Harvey had a lovely home on the summit of Troy Hill, now denominated Mount Troy, I think. Fruit trees, strawberries, and beautiful flowers in abundance featured the place. By working industriously through the day, I found some hours for recreation which were turned to good use. My pay was $5 per month, deducting $10, which I paid for a ticket to Pittsburgh and return, which left me an average of about $4 per month. My Christmas present from Mrs. Harvey was a red bandana handkerchief, while Mr. Harvey gave me $0.25. Contiguous to the lot of Mr. Harvey was that occupied by the family of Mr. Dewhurst, consisting of several members, one of whom, a noble son, was at the front, fighting for the life of this glorious Union and liberty. He gave his life, which proved his love and patriotism, and thereby immortalized his name. A daughter, fair, refined, and generous, Miss Anna by name, graced their household and lent warmth and cheer to all the surroundings. She was ever on the alert to detect and relieve want and misery, and the sunshine of her smile and the music of her cheery voice lifted up many a downcast, unhappy heart. Miss Anna's keen eye readily noticed that this writer was in his cabin and cribbed condition in that remote Troy Hill home, with no companion save the big dog, lonely and somewhat forlorn. Without hesitating, she advised him to occupy his spare moments in reading and studying for the improvement of his mind, and in order to show her interest in that behalf, she furnished him with sundry school books for the purpose. During the remainder of my sojourn on Troy Hill and the ensuing 4 years, I did not fail to devote all my spare time assiduously to the study of such school books as came within my reach, without the assistance of a teacher, a fact which I have never found cause to regret. There was another source of inspiration which I have cause to be grateful for and can never forget. I refer to the late Samuel H. Baird, a young gentleman and scholar, whose home at that time was Duquesne Borough, at the foot of the hill on which we resided along the shore of Allegheny River. Mr. Baird was the nephew of Reverend Walter Lowry, a faithful missionary to China, who in the middle of the last century was drowned in the Yellow Sea by Chinese pirates while working in the course of his duties. He was tall and slender of form, with fair hair, blue eyes, and finely chiseled features. It was easily seen that he was not framed to combat the storms and buffets of this world, and even in my inexperienced youth I feared the worst for him. He was so gentle, sympathetic, and kindly in his dealings with me that for once and only once I felt that in him I had a brother. It was he who first opened my eyes to the rich mind and beauties of the ancient classics, and in showing me a copy of Xenophon's Anabasis in the original Greek, he lighted a flame in my brain and heart never to be extinguished. He and Miss Dewhurst, the latter now, and for many years Mrs. Jehu Hayworth of Edgeworth, Pennsylvania, suburb of Pittsburgh, were both devoted teachers in the mission Sunday school on the hill, where they could be found engaged in their work of love every Sunday. One of the most helpful little books which could be placed in the hands of an ambitious youth was given me as a Christmas present on Christmas Day, 1862, by Miss Anna. The book is entitled The Improvement of the Mind, by Isaac Watts, D.D. I have it now before me. Christmas 1919, 57 years subsequent to the day on which it was given to me, and still the truths and valuable precepts contained in it are as fresh and vital as on the day when I received it. My friend Mr. Baird went to his reward a generation ago, but the good lady, a vigorous octogenarian, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, bides her time in the full assurance of a rich reward when the Master gathers in his ripened sheaves. He that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. Psalm 126:6. Upon mature consideration, I have concluded that my employment on Troy Hill was the most fortunate event for me during my boyhood days, and coming as it did when I was just in the dawn of youth, a period when the mind and character are in the formative process, and when I needed the warm sympathy and cordial advice which was lavished upon me by Miss Dewhurst and Mr. Baird, without any hope of reward, but solely in his name, it was a veritable godsend to me, and probably saved my soul alive. End of chapter 4.